Test. Hi everybody, we might get going if people want to come in a little bit more. I'll start by acknowledging that we are standing on Aboriginal land. This land was never ceded and it belongs to the Turrbal people in this part of Brisbane and the Yuggera people on the other side of the river, and I'll pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Thanks all for coming. We're rallying here today to oppose Labor's proposed deportation and entry ban bill. Now this bill was pushed through the House of Representatives in March this year. Now Labor immediately tried to get it through the Senate at the time, but it was opposed by the Greens and the Coalition, and it was sent off to a Senate committee for further inquiry. Now the majority of that Senate committee is now recommending that the bill be passed, so the bill will be back before the Senate in this coming term. Now this bill is a direct attack, a direct threat to the 12,000 or so failed asylum seekers living in our community on bridging visas. The bill will give the government the power to say either cooperate with your own deportation or face massive fines or a jail sentence of up to 5 years. Now we must remember that these 12,000 or so people were rejected by a deeply flawed system, fast-track system of processing that was introduced by Scott Morrison. Now numerous human rights groups have criticised the fast-track processing system as being unfair because one, it changed the legal definition of what a refugee was. It removed all legal aid to people making claims. People had a very short time to fill in their forms that were over 60 pages long and was only available in English. And also the right to any meaningful review of the results was removed. For example, the review process was carried out without interviews and no new evidence could be introduced. Now, in opposition, the Labor Party even criticised this fast-track processing, and in government they've actually recently just abolished it. But they have done nothing for the 12,000 people or so, the asylum seekers rejected by this unfair system. Instead, they are threatening to send them to jail if they do not cooperate with their own deportation. They are criminalising the right to seek asylum.
Shame!
True. Today, we'll hear from some of the people directly affected by this regressive bill. We will also be hearing some legal and some political analysis of the bill. Our first speaker is immigration and criminal lawyer Terry Fisher. Terry has helped numerous refugees on numerous occasions with applications, appeals and much more. Please make Terry welcome.
Good morning. I wish to acknowledge that we stand on the stolen lands of the Yuggera and Turrbal people. The Migration Amendment Removal and Other Measures Bill 2024, otherwise known as the Removal Bill, is tied up with the constitutional question as to whether or not the Migration Act allows the indefinite detention of Australian non-citizens. The 2004 High Court decision in Al-Kateb found that indefinite detention was lawful. The decision lacked adequate jurisprudential reasoning. In November 2023, the High Court in the decision of NZYQ was handed down. It held that it was unlawful for the Australian government to continue to detain a person in immigration detention where there was no real prospect of the person's removal from Australia. The decision affected only a limited cohort of persons who must be both stateless and have engaged Australia's protection obligations. In other words, found to be a refugee or cannot be returned to their country of origin because very clear human rights abuses would occur. 140 persons were released from detention and immediately preventative detention legislation was rushed through the Parliament, allowing the Minister to subject people to electronic monitoring, curfews, conditions restricting their conduct and movement. These measures would not apply to any Australian citizens that had completed prison sentences. On 26 March 2024, the Labor government introduced into Parliament the removal bill. The government had hit the panic button as it expected to lose the High Court case of ASF 17, in which the indefinite detention power was being considered. The proposed Labor Party legislation had two main aims. First, to force a person to cooperate with being deported from Australia, and secondly, to allow the Minister for Immigration to prevent people from certain countries from coming to Australia. Currently, as you've heard, the bill was shelved and is due to be debated again, as I understand it, next week. The ASF 17 case concerned an Iranian detainee who the government said was being lawfully held and could be deported if he cooperated with the efforts to remove him. The issue in the ASF 17 case was whether or not the limitation on detention applied to a person who did not have a formal protection finding but could not be removed to country of origin as it did not accept involuntary returnees, and the returnee did not consent to return. The High Court delivered its decision on 10 May 2024 and unanimously ruled that the Australian government can keep asylum seekers in immigration detention indefinitely in cases where they do not voluntarily cooperate with their own deportation. This includes, for example, when a person refuses to apply for travel documents due to a long-standing fear for their life if returned to their country of origin. At the crux of the ruling is the legal fiction that indefinite immigration detention can remain non-punitive and legitimate if a person is detained for the purpose of their eventual removal from Australia, even if the human effects of this detention are harmful and experienced as punishment. The removal bill goes much further than the High Court decision in ASF 17 by making refusal to cooperate in deportation or removal a criminal offence. The Law Council of Australia has criticised the removal bill. Some of the things it said are as follows. The bill is highly disproportionate and punitive in its effects on predominantly vulnerable individuals. We consider that the migration system will lack integrity if not based on Australia's international obligations and law. Not only would people face deportation even where they have genuine fears for their safety, but under this bill there is a very real possibility that the process of issuing a direction itself creates a situation of real risk of harm to individuals removed to that country, even if such risk may not have previously existed. Under this legislation, non-compliance with directions given is an offence, with a maximum penalty of 5 years imprisonment and a mandatory minimum of 12 months imprisonment. These are vastly disproportionate responses to a failure to comply with directions which may involve minor conduct which is not harmful or dangerous. The Council went on to say the ability to direct parents to act on the child's behalf with no legislative safeguards for consideration of what is a child's best interest being taken into account other than considering whether they can be removed with the family unit together. Now, this would put a parent in a situation that was concerned about their children going back to the country of origin, that they would suffer harm, ending up in jail for 12 months. But the reality is they could keep jailing you under this legislation. A person could be in our system, in our jail system, indefinitely. In other words, you could get multiple charges and multiple terms of imprisonment. Now, some of the characteristics or elements of the ASF 17 case were that the applicant was a bisexual Iranian man who had been held in closed immigration detention in Australia for more than 10 years. Although Iran criminalises homosexual activity, ASF 17 was found not to be a refugee under Australia's fast-tracked asylum claim process, which many experts have deemed to be flawed and discriminatory. And having been involved in acting for people in this process, I can tell you that it lacks procedural fairness to a number of the cases that I've seen, the substandard representation and substandard decision makers. The Attorney General Dreyfus has been wanting to replace the AAT system because he has said it's irreversibly damaged by political affiliated appointees. Now, for the most part, all these political affiliated appointees are still there making decisions. Nothing has changed since the ALP has got into power. The applicant in ASF 17 had refused to seek the required travel documents from the Iranian government. He had good reason for not cooperating with his own deportation. He had feared for his life if he returned to Iran, and in evidence he said, "I wouldn't have stayed in this camp for 10 years if I didn't fear that I was going to die." The applicant was prepared to be deported to any other country other than Iran. The Australian government acknowledged that there was no reasonable prospect of him being sent anywhere else. Iran would not have allowed him to return, as it does not take involuntary or forced returnees. It does not accept them. Yet the court found that there was a real prospect of the applicant's removal because it depended on him, on his conduct. The insanity of all of this, of course, is Australia has, in the Iranian situation, Australia has imposed sanctions against members of the Iranian regime responsible for human rights abuses and violations. In 2022, a Senate committee report recommended the Australian government increase the number of visas offered to Iranians, with a particular focus on women, girls and persecuted minorities seeking to escape the regime. Iranians in Australia on temporary visas who cannot safely return to Iran due to the current crisis and policies of the Iranian regime. And one of the effects of this bill is that Iran's considering accepting involuntary returnees because it's concerned that its own citizens won't be able to travel to Australia. So that's a great effect. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Our next speaker is Zara Azizi. Zara and her husband fled Iran in 2013, and they are currently living in the community on a bridging visa, and they are part of the 12,000 that are affected by this bill. Please make Zara welcome.
Good morning, everyone. I respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, past and present. Living in limbo is like being trapped in a relentless storm of fear and uncertainty. We have been living in Australia for the past 11 years. Despite our hard work, our contributions to this beautiful country, and our deep desire to be a part of this society, we remain in a state of limbo, without permanent residency and without certainty for our future. We are not allowed to study, leave the country, or visit families and loved ones. The simple act of visiting aging parents after over a decade is impossible. The pain of this separation is something words can hardly capture. Australia was supposed to be our safe haven, a place where we could rebuild our lives and pursue our dreams. Our children have grown up here, completed their education, and built their friendship and identity around being Australian. Yet now, they face an uncertain future. They cannot attend university, not because of their abilities or aspiration, but because of their status. And status that we have no power to change despite of our years of dedication and patience. We live with the hope that someday we will be able to embrace our loved ones again. But each passing day makes that hope feel more distant. this limbo has affected every aspect of our lives. It's the shadow over our every joy, a constant reminder of our insecure existence. Our children, like any young people, have dreams and ambitions. But how can they pursue them when the very foundation of their future is so unstable? They deserve the chance to study, build a career, and contribute to the country that has been their home for most of their lives. And now with this new bill, if it passes, we risk being forcibly returned to the homeland we fled to escape life-threatening dangers. The situation in that country is getting worse every day. They kill even child protesters by shooting them in the streets, imprison activists and women for their beliefs, and hang young people simply for protesting against injustice. We are not asking for a special treatment, but fair treatment. We are simply asking for the chance to live our lives with dignity and certainty. We have proven our commitment to this country through our work and our respect for its laws and values. We have integrated into the community, made friends, and tried to build a future here. Yet, despite all this, we remain in a state of uncertainty that hinders our ability to fully contribute and thrive. We urge the decision makers and those with the power to change this situation to consider the human cost of prolonged uncertainty and end this endless suffering. Consider the dreams that are deferred, the potential that is wasted, and the families that are kept apart. We yearn for the day we can truly call Australia our home without fear and without uncertainty. Thank you.
Thank you, Zara. If people want to stay in contact with the campaign, I urge you throughout the rally to go over to the Refugee Action Collective stall and leave your name on our contact list, and that'll keep you in contact with us. Our next speaker is Vashini Jayakuma. For many years, Vashini was involved in the Home to Billow campaign that successfully brought the Murugappan family back to Billawila. Vashini came to Australia in 2012 and with her family after fleeing civil war and persecution in Sri Lanka. In 2017, she was granted a temporary protection visa, which was recently upgraded to permanent protection. But her problems are still not over, as she will explain. Please make Vashini welcome.
Good morning, everyone. I begin today acknowledging the traditional custodian of the land which we gather today and pay my respect to the elders, past and present. My name is Vashini Jayakumar and I am a refugee from Sri Lanka. Also, I am a mother and a childcare worker and now a permanent resident of Australia. I am also one of those people whose families would be torn apart by this deportation bill. If this bill passed, my husband Rizwan, who is the father of our 3 children, would be put in a jail if he does not immediately leave Australia. Just because he refused to leave me and our young children. That is just not right. It's inhumane. It's more than trauma for our family after more than 10 years of pain and uncertainty. Before I met my husband, I was involved in a struggle for justice Priya, Nades and Murugappan. It took us almost 4 years to free Priya and Nades from their detention and get back to safely home to below. It's a nightmare to think that this government want to pass that law that would put Priya and Nades and her children to detention if they refuse to leave their community. It's unimaginable to me that Albanese government would do this for us. This government promised us justice and reverse of everything that that the previous government had done to us. Excuse me, sorry guys. They read that this government won't just put us to jail. To force people like Rizwan out of the country, like entering into nightmare. My family's story is not unique. There are thousands of people like us who have been Australian community over a decade and want to build a safe and permanent home here. Parents working 2 jobs so they can send their children to school, and student at university trying to become a nurse or doctors and lawyers. This bill could snatch everything away, but I believe that when Australian community find out that this government what trying to do to us, it will reject, just like our community did to Priya and Naresh. We are better than this. We are your neighbors, we are your friends, we are your colleagues. We are so much more than just a refugee. Please let us make a life here with certainty and permanency. Thank you.
Thank you, Vashini. We're now just going to have a bit of a musical break, and we're fortunate that David Rovics, a US singer-songwriter, is here, and he's going to be accompanied by Kamala, a local activist that I'm sure a lot of you will be familiar with, and they're going to sing a couple of songs. So David has written extensively about social justice and labour issues, and he has performed at numerous protests, rallies, pickets, fundraisers, and much more supporting these causes. So please, they've made their time available here for us today, so please make them welcome.
In April 2016, at a Australian-run island prison, Omid Masumali immolated himself. And, I outsourced my brain a long time ago to a device, and I can't remember anything, like even my own name sometimes. There's an ancient Iranian poem that all the Iranians here are familiar with, and if you don't know it, it's a really short poem, and you can find it online in lots of different languages. It's called Layla and Majnun. And Majnun and Layla were in love, but they couldn't be together. And Majnun wandered into the desert and died. And I think it's very appropriate to the story of Omid Masumali. When Layla met Majnun, Majnun, it was at a traffic light. He handed her his number at first sight. It all happened very quickly. Soon both of them were aware that life can be so good when it's shared. When Layla met Majnun, it was convenient, it would seem, that both of them were living in the city of their dreams. They had no plan to leave and lots of plans to stay, but one day that all changed and they had to go away. So Layla and Majnun together left the country. They got on a crowded boat, sailed the Pacific Sea. They were headed to Australia, a place they thought they knew. Then the Australian Navy took them to Nauru, where Layla and Majnun were kept there in detention on a tiny little island, run just like a prison, where they were told by immigration, dream all that you can, but your only pathway off this island is on a boat back to Iran. Layla and Majnun, amid the heat and damp, tried to make the best of life in a prison camp. But the strongest of foundations eventually will shake, and the strongest of hearts eventually will break. Layla and Majnun were on an island when one day there came some visitors from the UN. The next thing Layla knew, she was witness to the scene of her beloved doused in gasoline. Layla saw Majnun in a state no one should be in. Bright flames rising, burning off his skin. Sometimes you can reach a point so beaten down, so tired, the only action that seems left is to set yourself on fire. When Layla met Majnun, let's do that one. Yeah. You know, most people living in Australia are descendants of refugees. And this is an objective, easy thing to say. Doesn't require much knowledge of Australian history. But it's a frequently denied reality because it's a very inconvenient reality. And it's the exact same reality with slight variations shared by the United States and Canada, where I'm from, where most people are descendants of refugees. Huge numbers, of course, are descendants of people who were forcibly taken there in chains from Africa, and then significant numbers are also descended of indigenous people, you know. But most people are descended from refugees and from all over the world, and that's true of every side of my family. English, Irish, Hungarian, and Russian, all refugees. My mother's parents came here on a boat. They came from a land of kings and queens, but on the wrong side of the moat. My father's parents came here on one too. They didn't want to leave Austria, but it was the thing for Jews to do. I don't know your story, but I'll bet it's more or less the same. What kind of war or famine was on when your family came before their ship arrived? Did your folks come here to discover and explore, or were they refugees? Running from the war, did they cross the freezing mountains to make it to the sea? All the while wishing that they never had to flee. Were they marched across the jungles with chains around their feet, nearly dying of exhaustion in the desert heat before their ship arrived? Did they make a life here, or were they kidnapped and detained, held for years in limbo as their optimism waned? Were they turned down for asylum and told they shouldn't lie, then sent off to be tortured to move here, create their lives anew? Or are they held on Christmas Island, asking what on earth they can do before their ship arrives? Before their ship arrives.
Okay, thank you, David and Kamala. Now, David and Kamala will be performing at a solidarity concert for Palestine. The proceeds go to Justice for Palestine, shared with the Green Left. And that concert will be on Saturday, the 20th of July. They'll also be performing with Phil Monsua, and that'll be at the Carilpa Hall, 174 Boundary Street, West End. I'll remind people again, if you want to stay in contact with the campaign, please leave your name at the stall with the Refugee Action Collective over there. Okay, next week the bill will come before the Senate. The Greens will be opposing that bill in the Senate, and here to speak about why the Greens oppose the bill is Senator Larissa Waters. Please make Senator Larissa Waters welcome.
Thank you so much, Mark. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to start by acknowledging that we are on First Nations land here in Mianjin, also known as Brisbane, and it's the unceded land of the Turrbal and Yagara people. And this is, and it was, and it will always be Aboriginal land. And I do so hope that after the extremely disappointing and damaging setback of the Voice result, that we can still keep working towards truth-telling and treaty-making, and ultimately a voice as well, because our country deserves that, and that's how we heal, and that's true reconciliation going forwards. Thank you all for coming out in what is a very, very cold day for people who live here, and this really shows the strength of sentiment. I'm sort of pinching myself that we're in this situation. I've been in Parliament for quite a few years now, and we fought against offshore detention. We fought against that cruel Operation Sovereign Borders, where no one could tell anyone how cruel we were being to people who were seeking asylum on our shores. We fought against the children overboard nonsense, which was of course revealed to be nonsense. And I really had hoped and believed that when there was a change of government, that we'd see a significant change of policy, and that we could start to actually embrace people who were seeking asylum and who wanted to become wonderful members of our society and our community. And I've been extremely gobsmacked and really heartbroken to see what this government has delivered us. This bill, which they've proposed and which they initially tried to ram through the House, and they rammed it through in 2 hours, and they then tried to ram it through a Senate inquiry that again they scheduled for 2 hours the night after. Thankfully, we were then able to pause it and say, this is outrageous, you need a proper process here to scrutinise this bill. And when, in the process of doing so, we found that every single submitter, except the department themselves, said that this bill was, well, they didn't use the words racist, I'll use those words, this is a racist bill, but those submitters said this bill trashes our international human rights obligations. This is in breach of the Refugee Convention, this is in breach of other human rights conventions that Australia says that we will uphold. Now, on investigating this bill, it's not at all what I would expect from this government, and in fact it's worse than what we saw under the Morrison regime. There's 3 elements to this bill which Terry took us through really beautifully, and I'll just do a quick recap. The first one is a Trump-style travel ban, which says that if you're on a list of countries, you simply won't be able to get any visa to come here to Australia to visit your family who might be here. Now that sounds terrible, but they won't even tell us what countries are on that list. And we asked in estimates, where's the list? And they said, oh, we don't have it with us. And then they came back 5 minutes later and said, oh no, there isn't a list. So there is an absolute lack of certainty about about who this bill would apply to and the draconian implications it would have for family members wishing to visit. Now, the second part of this bill is really, really sneaky, because the High Court has said that indefinite detention is illegal, because it is, and because it is against human rights obligations. And so this government has sought to find a backdoor way to reintroduce indefinite detention. And the way they've done it is they've said if you're on a bridging visa of a number of different subcategories, the minister can order you to do a thing. And that thing might be, come and have a meeting with us 200 kilometres away, and you have to be on time, and if you miss the appointment, mandatory sentence of at least 1 year, no more than 5 years. That thing that they could ask you to do might also be apply for a passport, so that we can remove you to your country from whence you fled because you were not safe there. And again, if you refuse to do that, the minister must, it is a mandatory sentencing, the minister must impose a 1-year sentence upon you, and it can be as much as 5 years. This is the government and the political party that said that they didn't support mandatory sentencing. And we know that mandatory sentencing is terrible because it's a real, it infringes on judicial independence. It's against the rules of law. And so we've got a bill that trashes human rights obligations and puts those fundamental principles of law in the bin. But it doesn't stop there. The third reason, the third limb to this bill is that it says the minister themselves can overturn a refugee status declaration. Now that is gobsmacking power for any one human being to have, let alone a minister who is simply appointed by their own political party to do the job. We don't get to vote on who should be the immigration minister or the home affairs minister. Sure, we choose the party of government, but they decide amongst themselves who the minister is. And to give that person unfettered power to overturn refugee status simply boggles my mind. So this is a bill that is worse than anything we saw from the Liberal government, and I can't believe I'm even saying those words, totally unexpected. They've tried to rush it through. As I said before, we've been able to slow that process down and insist upon a Senate inquiry that's fulsome and that really revealed this bill is friendless, it's discriminatory, it's racist, and it's extremely damaging. It could rip families apart. And it could see, for example, a mum and her kids who have fled from Iran due to legitimate fears of persecution, it could see them sent back. Now, that's not the Australia that I thought we lived in, and that's certainly not the government that I thought we elected to change direction and to have a bit more compassion and some humanity in our policy making. I do take some heart, though, because we've got the list now of what legislation is on for the Senate this coming week. We sit again starting on Monday, and this bill is not on the list for this coming week. Now, I am hopeful that that is because all of you and all of your friends and all of your colleagues and anyone in this country with a heart who demands better, I'm hopeful the reason they haven't listed it is because you've already been reaching out to the Labor government, to your local rep, to the Minister Andrew Giles, to the Prime Minister, and saying to them, this bill is unforgivable. You must not proceed with this. You must drop this bill. This is un-Australian. It is discriminatory. It is racist. We will not vote for you if you proceed with this bill. I'm hopeful that you've already done that, and if you haven't, you've still got some time because the bill's not listed for this week. And as you know, the Greens are in the balance of power in the Senate, and that means the government needs us to pass their laws or it needs the Liberals. And this bill, we actually don't know where the Liberals are going to go because they think that this bill is both too weak and too strong. They've said they don't like the fact that the countries aren't listed, so we don't know the effect of that travel ban. Now, we agree that that's ridiculous to have this level of uncertainty. But they've also said it doesn't go far enough because they want temporary protection visas reintroduced to put people in a permanent state of limbo and put that permanent residency and citizenship even further on the back burner. So we're not sure whether or not the government has the Liberals on this bill. If they do, I'm afraid there's nothing we can do to stop it. We will throw everything we've got to slow it down, but the numbers will be there to pass it. If for some reason the Liberals don't support this bill because it's not bad enough for them, it's not racist enough, it's not damaging enough, or they don't want the Labor Party to get credit in the community for being tough on refugees, then the Greens will be in the balance of power, and I'm guaranteeing to you that we will use everything we've got, every parliamentary trick in the book, to slow down this bill and to stop it from coming on altogether. Now, we've got ways and means of doing that because they do need our votes on various other things. So my commitment to all of you today is that we will do everything we can to stop this bill, to stop it coming on, and if it does come on, to stop it passing. But it's really up to you to show the government that this is not what you want from the Australian government. This is not the direction you think we should be going in. So please join us and send that strong message, because we've stopped it being listed for this week, and I'm really hopeful that they are getting the message that this is really bad politics for them. Unfortunately, it seems that the fact that this is damaging isn't enough. We have to explain how this will be politically damaging and painful for the Labor Party if they proceed. And we do have a problem with structural racism in this country, as I'm sure you know, and I fear that the whole reason the Labor Party has come up with this bill is because rather than doing the things they said they were going to do in their election campaign, they're now trying to appeal to Liberal voters in order to shore up their own re-election. And they think the way to popularity and the way to re-election is to get more and more like Peter Dutton's Liberals. And it is getting harder to tell the difference between the two of them on this policy and on a number of others, which is really, really awful. And we shouldn't be in this predicament. And people deserve choice in a democracy. Well, the choice that we're giving you is that we will be standing with you, and we will fight against this bill, and we will always speak out for human rights and for fundamental decency, and for a country that embraces and recognises that half of us were either born overseas or our parents were, and that the strength of our nation is our diversity, and that is actually an advantage, and that we are collectively stronger by virtue of our love and compassion for each other. So I just want to give a shout out in particular to Zara and Vashini, who spoke earlier. My office has been trying to support them, and we've been writing letters to Giles, and my wonderful office manager Yasmin has been on the phone to the Minister's office hassling them. They're not very happy with her because she's on the phone to them all the time. And I'm so hopeful, Zara and Vashini, that we can get a good outcome for you and your family, but it shouldn't take a senator hassling the Minister's office to get a good outcome for people. Our laws should be decent, they should be welcoming, and they should be in accordance with fundamental human rights law. So we're with you. Please take this opportunity in the next week to write and telephone your local MP and Minister Giles and the Prime Minister, and send that message that this bill must be dropped, that the Labor Party simply cannot proceed with this, or nobody is going to vote for them anymore. They've got to realise that racism won't win them votes, and that actually Australians are better than that. So thank you, and let's hope we can defeat this awful bill.
Thank you, Larissa. The Deportation and Entry Ban Bill is not the only retrogressive action Labor has taken lately in relation to immigration and refugee issues. As Terry mentioned, Labor has imposed mandatory curfews and anklet bracelets on detainees released because of the NZYQ High Court case. Labor has introduced Direction 110, which makes it more likely that former prisoners, predominantly New Zealanders, who have done their time, will be deported to a country that they have very little connection with. Immigration Minister Andrew Giles recently put out a press release, and he was bragging that he had cancelled 30 visas of non-citizens with criminal records in the previous week. Now this is from a minister who, when in opposition, used to speak at refugee rights rallies. All of these harsh measures have been in response to Peter Dutton and the Coalition's racist fear-mongering about criminals being released into our community. The opposition claim that since the NZYQ detainees were released, that they were on a crime spree. Now this is nonsense. Yes, some refugees have reoffended, but it has been at a much lower rate than what ordinary Australian-born prisoners reoffend at. And it has often been in relation to the harsh curfew that's been imposed on them, or the tampering with the ankle bracelets. But rather than stand up to Dutton's racist fear-mongering, the Labor government is dancing to the same tune, moving to the right, taking measures that show that they too can be tough on border protection, just as tough on border protection as the Coalition. It doesn't have to be that way. If people are given the facts and the refugees are humanised, this fear-mongering can be defeated. We saw that with the Mooraguppan family, the Biloela family. They were demonised as economic refugees, as queue jumpers, as gamers of the system, but the Australian public were not convinced, and as a result that family is now back in Biloela where they belong. If the Biloela family had not have been granted permanent protection when Labor was first elected, they would be in exactly the same position as Zara and Vashini and their families are today. There is no difference between their situation and the situation of the 12,000 failed asylum seekers that we've been talking about here today. The Biloela family too were failed asylum seekers. The only difference is that the Biloela community rallied behind that family and built a high-profile public campaign that humanised them. And that is what we have to do for the 12,000 failed asylum seekers that we've been talking about. We have to build a public campaign that humanises them. The 12,000 people are living in our communities. They have jobs, they have workmates, they play sport, they have teammates, they have children in school, they have their children have friends, and they know their parents, and they have neighbours. These community connections are the best line of defence for these families. But we need more than a defensive campaign. We need to be on the front foot. We need to campaign and say, 10 years in limbo is long enough, and demand permanent protection for all the refugees now. Now, thank you, Terry and Larissa, for coming and giving us your time today, and thank you for Zara and Vashini for speaking out about your situation, and thank you all for coming along here today. There's only a few of us here, but I think we've got enough to march, and and as they say, from small things, big things grow. So say it loud, say it clear, refugees are welcome here. Say it loud, say it clear, refugees are welcome here. Say it loud, say it clear, refugees are welcome here. If people would like to grab that banner there, and we'll have it at the front, and we'll move up there, and we'll start to march around the street. Please join us.